I'm John Marino, Senior Editor for The Deal. We're joined today at our headquarters in New York by Joan Arnold. She's partner with Hamilton LLP, and today we're going to be discussing the inversion tax rate. It seems like the rate of companies now who are moving towards inversion tax deals is increasing, and I'm curious to know, A, what you're seeing, and B, what you're expecting going forward.
I think that what you're seeing is that every board of directors of companies are looking to see whether their company ought to be taking advantage of the inversions to lower their tax rate. So you're seeing it not just in the pharma space, but you're seeing it in companies that are bricks and mortar companies that are thinking about whether or not they should be somehow putting a foreign parent on top. There isn't an industry, I think, that is immune from it.
Interesting. And obviously private equity is kind of a business that's been quietly doing these deals, whereas Pfizer, to give one example, is something that was very public, where they were interested in doing an inversion tax deal that didn't pan out but can come back up later in the year. What's PE doing?
PE has a very different way of doing an inversion. Each time a private equity group buys a portfolio company, they look at that portfolio company and they say, should I put a foreign company on top of it? So it's not that they're taking an existing company and combining it with another to do what you see in the newspapers as the inversions. They very quietly put together structures where the acquisition company is a foreign corporation. It acquires the U.S. corporation, and then it can move the foreign earnings out from under the U.S. corporation up to the foreign parent. It's a self-help inversion.
And it hasn't been going on for very long, though. So what is kind of the timeline that the inversion tax practice has developed over the last few years?
I'd say the private equity piece has been ramping up over the last 3 to 4 years and looking at putting a foreign company on the top. As inversions, as the tax law got developed for inversions, people started to think more about creative uses for the inversion rules, as opposed to let's avoid the rules that got put into place. So I think the last 3 to 4 years you've seen more and more of the foreign parented companies that PE is using. In terms of the industry inversions, they've been going on since 1994. And we had a couple of times when we thought we had legislation that was going to close them down, and it simply hasn't done it. And the rash of inversions in the last 2 years has seriously increased.
And that's something that I'm seeing too. It's not just in the pharma sector. We're also seeing shareholders who are activists, who are investors in InterContinental Hotels, is pushing them now to take on a U.S.-based company and basically facilitate an inversion. So we're seeing, I guess, a lot of activity in terms of investors who want to see this happen. They see the value of this as well. You're
also seeing investment bankers,
right,
who have a new product to sell,
right,
who can go out and find the appropriate 21% partner for the U.S. company to acquire, and they're putting together deals. It's a very active community.
And I think the lawmakers are kind of seeing that this is maybe going to be a banker bonanza going forward. You said that you don't see this being legislated, quote unquote, against until after the end of 2014. So in terms of a timeline, what do you think Washington might do? It's a do-nothing Congress except for this.
Well, as I said before, when Senator Hatch came out and said that he would be willing to think about doing something on this, so long as it wasn't retroactive, that was the first time a Republican said this might be an appropriate thing for us to do. So I don't think you'll see it before the election. I do think that there's a possibility that you'll see it maybe at the tail end of Q4 or in the beginning of Q1, but I'm not sure it's going to do anything. It might stop the private equity structures because of this, because of the management and control test. But in terms of stopping the combinations of companies, you'll find other ways around it.
And just one last one before we go, because I'm anticipating that Wall Street will watch this very, very similar to the way that, for example, in 2011 or 2012, they were watching tax debates on Capitol Hill. So if they see a deadline out in front of them, I'm imagining that there could be a potential deal bonanza going forward right up until that deadline. Do you agree?
Yes, and before we had the Levin proposal, we had the Obama proposal in his budget, and that was supposed to have an effective date of 12/31/2014. So there is concern that at some point in time that might become the real deadline. So people are looking at it and trying to move fast, but you'll note that Medtronic isn't going to close until Q1.
Right.
So they're not moving that fast.
It's true. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Joan Arnold, joining us here at the Deal's headquarters in New York City. And I'm John Marino, and that's a wrap for us in the Inversion Talk for today.